lived nearby nurtured Leonardo's powerful drive to learn. Leonardo was apprenticed as a youth to the artist Andrea del Verrocchio. A legitimate son would never have been forced to learn a trade, especially one so disreputable as art. One day when Leonardo painted an angel, he was known to draw the faces of angels better than anyone, the older man reportedly threw down his brushes in jealous admiration and swore that he would never paint again. Still, Leonardo always felt at home at Verrocchio's, and in times of stress liked to return for visits. "It is easy to become a universal man," a young Leonardo wrote, and he somehow made it seem so. He never stopped his studies, working on countless projects, or at least starting them. In addition to artist, he could have easily become a city planner, architect, inventor, engineer, physician, musician, anthropologist, botanist, or astronomer. "I question," were the words he wrote most frequently in the elaborate notebooks he kept. He questioned practically everything. What causes tickling? Why are stars invisible during the day? What would it be like to walk on water? Would a fly make a different sound if you put honey on its wings? Every night Leonardo investigated anatomy in a way few others could have tolerated. He dissected corpses. His sources for bodies were either prisons where criminals had been executed or hospitals for the homeless. He could befriend a 100-year-old man one night and make drawings of the corpse the next. Many of his neighbors were likely to have been scared of Leonardo. He was so mysterious, with his secret autopsies officially banned by the Catholic Church, his scientific experiments, rumored to be some type of evil magic, and his desire for privacy. His notes were written backward so others couldn't read them. He was even left-handed, believed in those days to be a sure sign of the devil at work. In others, Leonardo inspired devotion. He was strong, healthy, and handsome, with a carefully brushed and curled beard. His rose-colored robes were short, unlike the long robes of most men, and he was always impeccably clean in an age when most people weren't. He couldn't even stand to have paint on his fingers. He carried himself like royalty and had elegant manners. Usually he was calm, though he was known to blush when he was insulted, as by his arch-rival Michelangelo. A welcome addition to parties, he devised clever riddles that made people roar with laughter, and he liked to play pranks that would make people scream. Once he unleashed a dragon, actually a large lizard. He rode horses well, sang well, played the lyre well, and of course could invent his own musical instruments when necessary. Leonardo could paint all day without eating, but when he stopped, his favorite meal was minestrone soup. He was a vegetarian, an eccentric choice at the time, and one more reason few people understood him. He felt sorry for animals, and believed that people who ate them were walking burial places. He was known to buy birds in the market in order to free them, as well as to study their flight. The thought of flying was one of only two things known to put Leonardo in really high spirits. The other was his design for a submarine. In personal relationships, most people seemed to find him melancholy and perhaps a bit cold. In his notebooks, the only reference to the woman believed to be his mother is a precise list of her funeral expenses. He made a note of every penny he spent. Leonardo had no family of his own, but informally adopted a peasant boy who lived with him for 26 years. The boy was known as Zelai, or Devil, because he constantly stole, even from Leonardo. The older man pampered him anyway, one year buying him 24 pairs of shoes, another time a coat of silver cloth lined with velvet. Between his jobs working for patrons at the various courts of Italy and France, Leonardo traveled. He packed light, taking along his notebooks, his painting of the Mona Lisa, and Zelai. While in Florence, Leonardo was accused of heresy against the church, probably for homosexuality, for which the penalty at the time was death. He was acquitted, but after this he became more secretive than ever. Nothing was more important to him than his liberty. Two of his earliest inventions had to do with escaping from imprisonment. Relationships with his patrons were often fraught with misunderstanding and bitterness. Leonardo was versatile. In a letter to a potential sponsor, he listed 36 services he could perform, but notorious for his counterproductive work habits. To get himself out of bed each morning, always a difficulty, he invented a water-operated alarm clock. Such inventions did nothing to end his daydreaming, his dislike of deadlines and schedules, his overambitious ideas, or his tendency to be easily distracted. Sometimes he took money for a work, then never did it, or made promises he knew he couldn't keep. When patrons became too frustrated, they would hire someone else to finish what Leonardo had started. Leonardo also experienced more than his share of bad luck, and his work gained a reputation as the most vandalized art in history. As a sculptor, he was influential and awe-inspiring, but none of his sculptures survived such assaults as being used for target practice by invading armies. Painting techniques he experimented with caused some of his work to disintegrate in his own lifetime. Once, while painting a battle scene on a wall opposite a wall being painted by Michelangelo, he used a new method he had read about. The technique resulted in disaster when all the paints melted together. He hadn't read the instructions all the way through to the part that said, "Don't try this on walls." His last boss, the King of France, remained a great admirer through all of these trials, and Leonardo's final 3 years were his most serene. Then one or both of his hands became paralyzed and his health declined. He died at age 67. The story that he died in the arms of the king is probably a myth. He was with Francesco da Melzo, a pupil and companion for the last part of his life. Francesco wrote to Leonardo's half-brothers, "It is a hurt to anyone to lose such a man, for nature cannot again produce his like." In his will, Leonardo left everything to Francesco, including his notebooks. He was buried in France, where his gravestone reads, "First painter, engineer, and architect of the king." Artworks. Possibly the world's most famous painting is the Mona Lisa, who some think was a real woman named Lisa La Gioconda, the wife of a banker. Her half-smile has mystified whole generations. Was she amused by the comedians Leonardo hired to keep her from getting bored during sittings? Was she missing her front teeth, which is what some dentists believe? Was she pregnant? Was she really a man? Was she in fact Leonardo himself? Some see a resemblance. And why did Leonardo hold on to the painting all his life? While Leonardo was painting the Last Supper for a group of monks, they kept coming around to ask what was taking him so long, 3 years. Later, the monks carved into the painting to make a doorway. The rest of the work was almost destroyed during the French Revolution, when Napoleon's soldiers threw stones at it, and World War II, when a bomb landed nearby. Recently, it has been restored inch by inch, with 500 years of grime removed. With the 5,000 pages of drawings in his notebooks, Leonardo was the world's first scientific illustrator. He did his technical drawings to improve his painting. He was obsessed with flying machines, and also drew the first cars, bicycles, machine guns, tanks, and much more. Michelangelo Buonarroti, born in Caprese, Italy, 1475, died in Rome, Italy, 1564. An influential Italian sculptor and painter, considered by some the greatest artist who ever lived, especially famous for the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Candles on his head. "I have known every shame, suffered every hardship," the man known as the divine Michelangelo once wrote. During his long, mostly lonely life, he made few friends and numerous enemies. With his strong personality and forceful speech, Michelangelo created an impression of messiness, fierce pride, and gloom. Legendary for doing battle with anyone he disagreed with, he was the first to describe himself as mad and wicked. He could insult a fellow artist to the point where he would get sued for libel, and lose. The broken nose in his famous profile resulted from a fist fight with a rival sculptor. His rivalry with Leonardo was especially intense, and he taunted the older man in public. He once got even with the critic by painting him into a picture, smothered by a coiled snake. Another time a duke who resented Michelangelo's independent spirit would have had him killed if the Pope hadn't intervened. Michelangelo always had a stormy relationship with his father, whose violent disapproval he had to overcome in order to study art. Yet Michelangelo was always loyal, once writing to him, "All the troubles I have borne out of affection for you." During his life he made great sacrifices to help his father and 4 brothers. His mother died when he was young. Michelangelo's love for stone, he often said, came from a stonecutter's wife who had nursed him when he was a baby. His favorite material to work with was expensive marble, and he was at the mercy of wealthy patrons who could afford it. But he could work with anything, and once, upon request, created what may have been the world's most magnificent snowman. Eventually he became wealthy, but he always acted as if he wasn't. During his last 30 years, he lived in a small, dark house in an alley. It was decorated with cobwebs and his drawing of a man carrying a coffin. He seldom bathed or even took off his dog-skin boots. When he did remove them, sometimes bits of his feet came off too, as he didn't believe in buying socks. He wore black quilted jackets and broad-brimmed felt hats. He ate crusts of bread while he worked, and at night, when he couldn't sleep, he put a device on his head that held a candle made of goat grease, which dripped less than wax. It created weird shadows that must have perplexed the neighbors, but shed enough light for him to work by. Michelangelo could be generous in helping younger artists, but he had few real friends, until he made time for them late in life. One was a young Roman nobleman, Tommaso di Cavalieri, and the other was a noblewoman and poet, Vittoria Colonna, whom he greatly respected. He loved to have long conversations with her in her garden, sitting against her ivy-covered wall. Because of his passion for the male form, he used male models even for the women in his art. Most people assumed that Michelangelo was homosexual. Michelangelo remained lean and strong, and even in old age he could split blocks of marble with a single strike of his mallet. He rode horseback in the country every day, whatever the weather. He worked right up to the then unusual old age of 88, when he caught a fever after riding in the rain and died a few days later. Artworks. At age 23, Michelangelo finished the sculpture called the Pietà. After delivering it himself in a handcart, he overheard an awed spectator say Michelangelo was too young to have created the work. Angry, that night he returned and chiseled his name on it. The Pietà is the only work he ever signed. Michelangelo once fought with Leonardo over a block of marble that had been stored for years in a cathedral workyard. Michelangelo won and worked on his new sculpture for almost 3 years, the marble chips piling high as he chiseled away. The result was David, the biblical hero, and the work that made Michelangelo world famous. One of the wonders of the art world was created under what may have been the worst working conditions. While painting the enormous ceiling of the Sistine Chapel at the Vatican in Rome, Michelangelo developed numerous ailments from spending more than 4 years 60 feet in the air, head bent back, paint splattering in his face. Now as many as 7,000 tourists come every day, craning their necks to see Michelangelo's ceiling. Peter Bruegel, born in the Netherlands 1525, died in Brussels, Belgium 1569. An outstanding Flemish painter of the 16th century, most famous for landscapes and images of peasant life. The Uninvited Guest. Dozens of books have been written about Peter Bruegel, but in his own lifetime he was just one of the 360 painters in the Guild of St. Luke in Antwerp. At least 3 villages claim to be his birthplace. The guild, into which he was admitted at about age 25, was a brotherhood in which he spent several years working as an apprentice.